वहाँ क्यों चल रहा? सारी नहीं अभी तक आए लगता है।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
Okay, good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. Let me quickly mark your attendance. Actually, I will take a screenshot. So, just a minute. So let Faria get into the class as well so that I can mark the attendance. All right, so now, okay, all are in.
हाँ सर, ये जो आपकी पिछली क्लास की रिकॉर्डिंग थी ये आप YouTube पर अपलोड करेंगे जैसे आपके पहले क्लासेस होते हैं।
Yeah, okay, all right. I will do it now. Actually, I didn't get time to upload it, so yes, I do have the recording, and I will update it very soon.
ओके सर।
Okay, all right. So your attendance has been marked, and now let's start the new chapter, because you know that I have already shared the worksheet with you, and in fact, two of the students, they have already submitted it to me. So they were very quick, huh? And that's good that they are so serious that submitting assignment is very important. Okay, all right. So let's
मार्क कर दे अटेंडेंस, वो आ रही है।
कौन?
तैयबा आतिफ।
Taiba Atif. Okay, all right. Let her come. I'll see. All right. So today we'll talk about the chapter the next chapter, that is about business finance. Okay, chapter number 25. All right, we covered chapter 24, that was about inventory management, and now we are going to start chapter number 25, that is about business finance. All right, let me see. Right now I can't see Taiba. Okay, as soon as she comes, I'll see. All right, now, so business finance, the first question is, what is business finance. So, sorry, you need to understand that the amount of money which is required by a business to support its activities. And there are lots of activities which actually are involved as far as a business is concerned, right? And we will talk about them as well. Like few of them could be you have to pay wages, you have to buy machinery, you have to either buy a building as well, then you have to buy raw material. So there are actually lots of activities where money is required. So to support those activities, the money which is required, we call it business finance, right? Okay. So Hussein, okay, still it's now almost 10 minutes past 12. So now I will not actually allow anybody to enter my class. All right. So now let's talk about uh, business finance, why it is important, what are the different sources which are available for a business to generate such sort of finance. Okay, but you know that it is crucial for every business. You know about it. So let's discuss it. First of all, we'll talk about that there are actually two types of expenditure which business is required to meet with the finance available, right? I told you earlier that there are lots of activities in which business is involved and business requires a certain amount of finance. Please mute your mic. I think somebody's mic is uh, open. Please just mute it. All right, thank you. So it means business has to meet different types of expenditures. So we categorize those expenditures. So we get into two of the main types of expenditure. Okay, and we call it capital and revenue expenditure. Okay, before I'll talk about what is a capital expenditure and what is a revenue expenditure, you can see in the picture as well, but I will get to it later. So let's discuss what is a capital expenditure and what is revenue expenditure. Let's see that. All right. So let me, I guess this is, I don't know, I just put it there on my desktop. Right now it's not there. Let me see. Okay, all right, because I'll find it maybe some other time. So let me discuss it with you about the concepts, capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. Okay, let me see there. Okay, actually, I think I have lost it somewhere. So, okay, I won't waste much of your time because I think that it has gone somewhere. I don't know. All right, getting back to the same slide. So now remember that when we talk about capital and revenue expenditure, we can differentiate these two expenditures in three different ways. Okay, one, when money, capital expenditure basically increases the capacity of a business. Do remember that. Whereas revenue expenditure does not increase the capacity of a business. Now, when I use the word capacity, what does it mean? It means, for example, if the business is involved in manufacturing, okay, so if you do, if that business does capital expenditure, definitely it will increase the capacity of the business to produce more. Now, how it happens, for example, if the business buys another building, okay, so earlier the business was able to produce 500 items. Now, with the help of that building, the business is able to produce 1000 items. So the capacity has increased, right? So that is why we'll call it a capital expenditure. This is one way we can differentiate it. Okay, when we talk about revenue expenditure, it does not increase the capacity. And one of the example could be, for example, the building you bought earlier, now you need to maintain that as well. Like getting some parts of the building repaired, or whitewashing the whole building again. Does it increase the capacity of the business to produce? Obviously not, right? But this is the maintenance of the building, right? Which is required. Okay, this is revenue expenditure. Okay, this is how we differentiate it. Second is, when we talk about capital expenditure, the benefit is for more than 1 year. Like you spend money, okay, for capital expenditure, and you get the benefit for more than 1 year. It means you keep on getting. Think about the same example. You buy the building, and then now you will be using that building for so long. You'll be using it for 10 years, 20 years, right? So you can keep getting the benefit from it as well. But think about the maintenance of that building. I just gave you the example. Now, let's say you got the building repaired, some parts of the building, all right. After a year, again you find some other parts which require some kind of repair work, right? So it means every year, or maybe after 6 months, you may have to spend on the maintenance of the building, right? So this is actually a revenue expenditure. Why it is a revenue expenditure? Because you cannot enjoy the benefit of revenue expenditure for more than a year. You have to spend again if you want to get the benefit, right? Similarly, I'll give you an example: payment of wages to workers. Now, this is again a revenue expenditure. Do you know why? Because you pay workers salary for 1 month, and if you want to use the workers again, right, for the next month, you have to pay them again. It's just not possible that you pay workers once in a month, okay, and then you can keep using them for years or for many months. This is just not possible. So every time, if you want to take the benefit from the skill of the workers, you have to pay them again. So that is why so it means that the benefit of using the workers was for less than a year. In fact, that was for a month only, right? So that's why that was a revenue expenditure, payment of wages to workers, right? Similarly, if I talk about payment made to buy raw material, again, it's the same. You get raw material, you use it in the production process, and then it's over, right? The benefit is gone. Now, if you want to produce more, you have to buy raw material again to get the benefit of using that raw material again. So it is a revenue expenditure rather than a capital expenditure, because the benefit is going to be enjoyed by the business for less than a year. So in that case, it is actually even for a month only, or maybe for a few months if I talk about raw material, right? So uh, so there are 2 points of differences we discussed, and the last is, if you so in simple words we can say, if business spends money on non-current assets. Remember, non-current assets are those items which are kept by the business and used by the business for more than a year. So building is one of the example. And if you see the slide, the car, if business buys a vehicle, and now because of that, the business is able to supply goods to its customers efficiently, and now more customers can be entertained. So it means this is a non-current asset. Why? Because that vehicle will remain with the business for more than a year, right? And it is a non-current asset. Okay. But if I talk about the maintenance of the vehicle, it becomes a revenue expenditure, because you have to spend money again and again to get the benefit. Whereas in capital expenditure, you spend once, but you get the benefit multiple times. Okay. And it is usually more than the span of a year. So this is how you do it. So one is, capital expenditure increases the capacity of the business. Revenue expenditure does not do it. Capital expenditure's benefit is enjoyed by the business for more than a year, even if you spend once, right? Whereas in order to get the benefit from revenue expenditure, you have to spend again and again, because the benefit can only be enjoyed for less than a year. And the last is, if you spend on non-current assets, so that is a capital expenditure because it meets the other requirements like you buy vehicle, it increases the capacity of the business to entertain customers, and the benefit is going to be enjoyed for more than a year, right? But the maintenance of the car will be the revenue expenditure. And remember, revenue expenditure is actually the day-to-day expenses of the business. So you remember maintenance of car, payment of electricity bills, utility bills, payment of wages to workers, payment to suppliers for the raw material you bought earlier. So these are actually the daily expenses of the business. So these all have the same characteristics I just mentioned. So that's why all daily expenses, they are part of revenue expenditure, right? So because they are daily expenses, so that's why you need to have sufficient amount of finance available to meet those expenditures, right? Whereas in capital expenditure, yes, the amount might be large, but you do not require it every now and then. You might require it maybe at a certain point of time, and after that it might not be required. Why? Because now you can get the benefit for a longer time period. But revenue expenditure might be small. Okay, it might be small, but you need to have a finance on all the time. Why? Because you have to spend it every day, or maybe after every second day or third day, whatever, right? So now I think you have the understanding of what is the difference between capital and revenue expenditure, and these are the two expenditures which are experienced by every business. Okay, and for that, business requires a certain amount of finance. Now, any problem regarding the concept I just explained? Anybody, you are most welcome. Any question from you guys? Or there is none? Should I assume that? All right, I am moving forward now. Okay, now why is business finance needed? Now, this is the question. I have already answered it. Actually, business finance is required to finance your expenditures, and it includes your capital expenditure and revenue expenditure, right? So let's see them one by one, and I'll ask you actually. First is to set up a business. Again, you require finance, but I want somebody to answer. Either it is a capital expenditure or a revenue expenditure. So Umar Azam, can you tell me, to set up a business, is it a capital or a revenue expenditure?
Sir, capital.
Very good, capital expenditure, because to set up a business, you require a building, machinery, right? So, sorry, land. So obviously, you are actually buying non-current assets, or the assets which business will uh, keep it for a longer time period, or the benefit of it will be enjoyed by the business for more than a year. Okay, then to meet day-to-day expenses. So Aliza, Yasin, Malik, what is it? Either it is capital or revenue?
Sir, revenue.
Revenue. Thank you very much. Very good. Yes, that's right. To expand the business. Aisha. Aisha, what is it to expand the business?
Revenue.
Revenue expenditure. Okay, just wait there. I want Ahmed Abdullah. Is it right?
Yes, sir.
Ahmed Abdullah, is it right to expand the business? Is it a revenue expenditure?
Sir, expanding the business is a capital expenditure.
All right. Thank you very much, Ahmed. Now, listen. Um, actually, again, concentrate on what I just explained. When you expand your business, what happens? You open more branches, you extend your building. So, what is happening? It is increasing your capacity to produce, okay, as a business. So, definitely, capacity is only increased in capital expenditure and not in revenue expenditure. So, expansion of the business is a capital expenditure if we go by that definition which I just explained. Then to handle financial crisis. Bilal Jamil, what is it? Bilal Jamil, is it a revenue or a capital?
Capital, it's a capital expenditure.
Capital. Can you explain me how? Can you tell me? Like, for example, okay, let me give you an example. To handle financial crisis, now what does it mean? It doesn't mean actually loss. Sometimes it means that business does not have ready amount of cash available. For example, production is going on, and then later on, production will end in finished goods, in the form of finished goods, and then it will be sold in the market, and then revenue will come to the business, right? But right now you have to pay to your workers every month. So after a month, for example, workers demand uh, the salary or the wage, right? But right now you do not have the cash available. Okay, so we will call it this is a financial crisis because business is not able to pay its daily expenses. Because when I talk about capital expenditure, it can be paid. How? You can avoid it. Like for example, you do not have sufficient amount of finance. So will you go expanding your business? Obviously not. Will you buy more machinery? Obviously not, right? So financial crisis means that when business is not able to run its existing operations, whatever they are doing, they are not able to manage it just because of lack of funds. So basically, financial crisis, if you this is actually an example of a revenue expenditure. You have to pay your workers timely. You have to pay to your supplier for the raw material as well, right? If you don't pay, the supplier won't supply the raw material, and your production will stop because you may not have enough raw material to produce further, and supplier is not willing to supply you because you are not paying the supplier at the right time. So these are all daily expenses, right? They are of routine nature. So that's why this is part of revenue expenditure. And if you do not pay it, we say that business is in financial crisis. Now, to pay for research and development, so Faizan, can you answer? Either it is a revenue or a capital expenditure?
Capital expenditure.
Very good. Capital expenditure. Why? Because let's say you research the market and now you are able to develop a new technology. Or let's say you research and then you are able to develop a new technology which helps you to produce more. Earlier, you were not able to produce more with the old technology. Now you are able to produce more with a new invention. Okay, so it means it has increased your capacity, right? So yes, it will be a capital expenditure in that case. All right. Okay, then I hope that everybody has understood that. Okay, so why finance is needed? So actually, finance is always needed to meet the expenses of the businesses, and those expenses either they are capital expenditure or they are revenue expenditure, right? I think you have got it all, right? Now let's move on to working capital. I told you earlier one thing, and what is that? That revenue expenditure are routine nature expenses, right? They are of routine nature. So to meet them on daily basis, you need to have ready amount of cash available. Okay, some amount of finance to pay wages to workers, to pay payment to suppliers, payment of utility bills, payment of the rent of the building, okay, and so on. So for that, you need to have sufficient amount of cash, and we call it working capital because working capital actually helps business to meet its daily expenses, and it must be there all the time with the business. Okay, and that is why we call it working because it doesn't remain there um, idle, because you have to use it every now and then on regular basis to meet your revenue expenditure. Do remember, working capital is not to meet capital expenditure, it is to meet daily expenses, because generally working capital is not much, and I told you that the value of revenue expenditure is not that big, so you can manage it with your working capital if it is of reasonable amount, right? Okay, and if business does not have sufficient amount of working capital, we say business is facing financial crisis, as I just mentioned. Supplier won't supply to you, workers won't work, the owner of the building would not allow you to continue production in the building, right? The if you want to pay the utility bills, so obviously you won't get the electricity, okay, or the energy which you require. So you will face financial crisis in that case. Okay, now what is meant by working capital? I have discussed it. So working capital is the amount of capital which is required to meet the daily expenses of the business. So when I say daily expenses, it means working capital is actually used to meet revenue expenditure, because all daily expenses, they are part of revenue expenditure. Do remember that. So they are very crucial, because if it's not available, business cannot continue their production. So the whole process will stop. So you can imagine that what will happen then, because if it happens for a few more days, so you have to close down your business, because then there will be no way out. All right. So importance of working capital, I explained you. In fact, working capital is extremely important. In fact, it is more important than profit. You know that all private sector businesses, they actually work for profit, but they can still survive without profit. How? Because if still you have sufficient amount of cash available, you can continue with your production, right? But think about, okay, and you can survive for a couple of months without profit even, okay? But think about uh, with the absence of working capital, business even cannot survive for one day. Why? Imagine, if you do not pay daily wages to workers, the workers won't work. Okay. If tomorrow you want to buy raw material from a supplier and you do not pay, again there is a problem, right? So working capital is very crucial. Okay. In fact, it is the lifeblood of an organization. Lifeblood. Without it, business cannot survive. Okay, working capital cycle, you need to understand that as well. Now, working capital cycle means that how much time it takes uh, um, the money to get it back to the business. Now, what does it mean? Let me explain you. You spend money to start your business and then you start producing it. Okay. After producing it, you sell it to the market and then you get the revenue from it. Okay. Revenue is the amount of money you receive when you sell products, right? So the amount of money you get in the form of revenue, you receive it. So working capital cycle actually means that after how much time you get the money back, because you have to meet your daily expenses. You cannot stop your production. So if I say for a retailing business, let's say a person who is responsible to manage a shop or a person who is the owner of the shop, let's say. So maybe working capital cycle might be very low or too small. Why? Let's say the person hires a building, okay, on rent, and then puts the items or let's say grocery items in that shop, okay, and the same day customers start coming in and the shopkeeper starts selling the goods and cash starts coming in. So maybe it may take maybe 2, 3, 4, or maybe at the maximum 1 week is required to get the money back, right? So it means working capital cycle is small in that case, and it starts from the time period when you pay your money and the time when you get it back. So the difference between these two times is actually the working capital cycle. So let's say you start spending money on your business from the day one, and then you are able to sell your goods on, let's say, on day 7. So 7 minus 1, 6. So your working capital cycle will be 6 days, right? And why it is important? Because the smaller the working capital cycle, the less cash business will require to hold, right? Because business will always have cash after 7 days, right? So it will be easier for the business to manage daily expenses, especially revenue expenditure. But think about a manufacturing business where you manufacture cars, let's say. So for that you have to hire a building, and then you know that manufacturing of cars take time. They may take a month. Okay, so it means now working capital cycle will be too big. Okay, so you actually start spending from day 1 and till day 30 or maybe day 60, you might not be getting anything because you have not manufactured cars till that time, and then you will sell your cars and then cash will start coming into your business. Okay, so that's why the working capital cycle might be 30 days or 60 days. So if this is the case, you need to have large amount of cash with you, because you know that you won't be getting cash within 30 or 60 days, depending on the nature of the business. Okay, but in case of a retailer, a person who is responsible to manage a shop, maybe that person does not need a large amount of cash to meet the daily expenses. Okay, so that is why it is very important, that concept, working capital cycle. So managing working capital, again, how can you manage your working capital so that the cash must be in the business all the time, because ready cash must be there. It happens even in the school as well. School must have to spend on daily basis. Okay, so for that, again, if I talk about city school must have in their Ravi campus must have certain amount of cash available, because on daily basis there are certain expenditures which they have to meet, right? So how can you manage it so that cash must be available or working capital must be available all the time? Because revenue expenditure can be unforeseen as well. Okay, like for example, if a student gets himself or herself injured, and now the school management has to take the student to the hospital. So again, a certain amount of cash is required, right? This is an unforeseen expenditure. So this happens, especially in revenue expenditure. So you need to have sufficient amount of cash available with you. Now, how can we manage it so that the business has cash all the time? One is managing debtors. Now, debtors are the people to whom you sell goods, but you do not get cash immediately. You actually give them the leverage that, okay, you can buy goods now and you can pay later, maybe at some future date, after maybe couple of months, or maybe after 3 months. Okay, this is how it is done. Okay, now, so those people are your debtors. Okay, or we call them trade receivables. Debtors or trade receivables. Okay, so now, one way is do not extend credit to them. Now, what does it mean? Like for example, if you have given them 2 months time to pay the amount, okay, now if they ask for an extension, they say, all right, right now we do not have, can you give us 1 more month? Now, do not do it. Why? Because it will disturb the amount of working capital in your business. Why? Because instead of getting cash back at 2 months, after 2 months, you'll be getting back after 3 months. So it can lead to financial crisis. It can hamper the ability of the business to meet its daily expenses, right? So one is manage your debtors well. Do not, and how to manage it? Whatever deadline you have given to your debtors, collect the money right at that time. Do not give them any extension at all, so that you can get the money at the right time. Second is managing creditors. Again, how do you manage creditors? And who are creditors? Creditors are the people from whom you buy goods. Okay, you buy raw material or whatever, right? So you buy from them, but you do not pay them immediately. Okay, and you tell them, okay, we'll pay you after 2 months. Okay, so now how you can manage it? Now ask them for an extension in the credit period. Now, what does it mean? It means instead of paying after 2 months, you can tell them, please allow us to pay after 3 months, because it will help you to have sufficient amount of working capital. If you feel that you have to meet your revenue expenditure, so you can delay payment to your supplier. You are buying from your supplier, for example, raw material, but you are not paying it on the spot, and you are asking that supplier, even for example, if you have asked for 2 months, so after 2 months, you can request the supplier to allow you to pay after 3 months. So this can increase the amount of working capital you have, and it will help the business to meet its daily expenses. So this is about managing creditors. Then managing stock as well. So do not buy too much stock, because we discussed that in the previous chapter as well. If you buy too much stock, then a lot of money or cash will be tied up in the form of inventory. There is a warehouse, you have bought too much raw material, and now it is lying there in the warehouse, and there is no need to use them in the near future. So it means cash is tied up, and it may lead to financial crisis or inability of the business to meet its daily expenses. So it is better to keep low level of your stock, so that ready amount of cash will be available to you to meet your daily expenses. And finally, managing cash, you can use cash flow forecast for it as well. Now, what is cash flow forecast? I think I haven't explained it. Actually, the next chapter is about cash flow forecast, but I'll give you some idea. Cash flow forecast is actually when you predict how much cash will come into your business and how much cash will go out of your business on monthly basis. Remember, it's not about a year. It's about on monthly basis. You will see how much cash is coming in and how much cash is going out. Okay, and you forecast it. Why do you forecast it? Because you need to understand that in a month whether more cash is coming in or going out. Because let's say this is December. So let's say if you forecast that in January more cash will go out and less cash will come into the business, right? So you can see that yes, there can be a problem of financial crisis in the month of January, because you may run out of cash, because more money will be leaving the business because you are spending more, and less cash will come into the business. Why? Because you are selling less. Maybe the off-peak season is there and you might not be able to sell more. So obviously less cash will come in, but you have to produce. So more cash will go out of the business. For example, if this is the case, so it means the cash which comes in, we call it cash inflow. The cash which goes out of the business, we call it cash outflow. All expenses which businesses meet, they actually result into cash outflow. And the revenue we get by selling products, that actually leads to more cash inflow. So you can manage it this way. How? If you feel that in January more cash outflow will be there, so you need to arrange cash beforehand. What you can do, you can take a loan from the bank, or we can call it overdraft. You can get an overdraft, maybe that is a facility which you can avail as an account holder, that please, let's say you have $10,000 in your bank account. You ask your bank, okay, can I get $12,000 instead of 10,000 using my bank account? So bank can give you that facility. So you have to do something so that in the month of January, you must have more cash available, so that you'll be able to meet that expenses, because more cash outflow will be there in the month of January. So you can use cash flow forecast as well, although there is a complete chapter on cash flow which we will study in the next chapter. All right, so we are done with working capital. So any question regarding working capital? You are most welcome if there's a question. Shazib Khalid, any question? So Shazib doesn't have a mic. All right. So is that clear, Alina?
Yes, sir.
All right. So moving onwards, now we'll talk about how can we. Now we have talked about we need to have sufficient amount of working capital. Fine. We have to meet revenue expenditure as well. We have to meet capital expenditure as well as a business, right? But now we are going to study what are the different sources from which finance can be raised by a business. Okay, let's discuss them. What are those sources? One is internal sources of finance. Now, internal sources means when you are able to arrange finance or raise finance from within the sources. Shanzeh, do you want to say something? Your mic is open. All right, so you are done with it. Okay, so internal source of finance, when businesses, they are able to raise finance or generate finance from within the business. Okay, we call it internal sources. Now, how can, so what could be the examples? Let's discuss it. One is retained profit. Retained profit, you understand that whenever business earns profit, they keep it with them, with itself, right? So that if in the future it is required, they must be able to use it. Generally, for example, retained profit can be used for the expansion of the business.